Okay, in this session, we discussed about the block statements. First one is data hyphen nestle hyphen use. It will be useful to create object for Java classes and JS and HTML and content nodes in JCR repository. Second one is data hyphen nestle hyphen include. It will be useful to include one HTML file into another HTML file. Because while executing any component, Sling execute only one file. Sling execute only one file. So if you have the multiple files inside the component, you have to include those files. We have to include those files inside this default HTML file. So for example, article detail.html file is the default file. In this file, we have to include writer.info.html and article stack.html files. Otherwise, these two files won't execute. And next one is data hyphen nestle hyphen resource. It will be useful to include one component into another component. So in this example, we have included button component inside this article detail component. So this is the syntax you have to remember. To include one component into another component. So here we have mentioned the component path, news portal, components, button. And next one is data hyphen nestle hyphen test. So this is one conditional based statement. If this condition is satisfied, then only these three HTML markup will be injected. So here condition is data hyphen nestle hyphen test equal properties dot article title. So here we did not use any comparison operator. Equals, not equal, less than, greater than, less than equal, greater than equal. So these are the comparison operators, but we did not use any comparison operator. If you don't use any comparison operator, by default will check not null and not empty. Not null and not empty. Data hyphen nestle hyphen test equal properties dot article title not null and not empty. So if the article title is not empty, not null, then only it will execute these three statements. Article title, article description, and article image. So these three statements will execute and inject into the final HTML markup if this condition is satisfied. And list and repeat both will be useful to inject. List of objects. The list of object may be an array or any collection object. Example, array list or hash set or hash map. You can use any collection object. For the example purpose, I have given only 3, but you can use any one of the collection object. And repeat also same, but there is a slight difference between list and repeat. This is an example. In the list, it will iterate only the child element. We can define one or more lines of the child elements. So in this example, I have defined only one element. But in the real time, we can define multiple HTML elements as the child elements. All these child elements will be repeated multiple times if we use data hyphen nestle hyphen list. Check the output. The size of this article label is 3. So this li element is repeated 3 times. So here ul is a host element because we have defined the syntax here. Ul is a host element, li is the child element. So this child element will repeat 3 times because the size of the variable is 3. So here article labels is an array. Size of that array is 3. 3 times the li element is repeated. But if you use data hyphen nestle hyphen repeat instead of list, if you use data hyphen nestle hyphen repeat, so this repeat will iterate host and child element. This entire block will be repeated. The entire block will be repeated 3 times because the size of the article label is 3. 3 times the entire block will repeat. So this is the difference between list and repeat. If someone started asking interview questions on HTL, so this is the first question. What is the difference between list and repeat? And most popular interview question. So both will be useful to iterate the list of objects, but list will iterate only the child element and repeat both host and child element. The entire block will repeat multiple times. The entire block will repeat multiple times. So this is the difference between list and repeat. And next block statement is data-sl-template. Data-sl-template and data-sl-call. So these two also important for interview. Data-sl-template and data-sly-call. Template and call. So these two are equal to functions or methods in the programming languages. If you write code in Java or .NET or any programming language, we'll write the methods or function. Both are same. Based on the technology, these keywords will change. Methods or functions. The purpose of these methods or functions are for reusability purpose. If any logic is reusable in multiple places, so rather than repeating the same logic in multiple different classes, we'll define it as a method. And we'll call that method wherever it required. Wherever it required. The main purpose of the method is for reusability purpose. We'll define a reusable logic as a method, and we'll call that method from the multiple places. So here also data-sl-template also a reusable HTML block. A reusable HTML block defined once and call the same method from the multiple places or from the same file. So there are three different variations in this template. There are three different variations in the template. It is similar to your Java programming language. While defining any method, we can define a method with argument or without argument. Even in the JavaScript also, we can define a method or function with argument or without argument. In the first step, let's discuss about without argument. Majority of the cases, we don't use this approach because if you're not passing any data to template, means we are hard coding the data. So this is not the right example. Sorry, this is not the right way to use this template. Check the syntax. Div, inside div, data-sl-template. This is one block statement to define a reusable block. And writer info is the name of the template. Writer info is the name of the template. Inside this div, there are three different statements: H1, H2, and H3. First name, last name, and email ID. So I have defined this entire HTML markup as one template. And if you want to call this template, we have to use data-sl-call. Data-sl-call equal double quote, curly braces, and then template name. So explicitly, we have to call the template, otherwise this block will not execute. Even if you define the template in one HTML file, by default, this block will not execute. By default, this block will not execute. We have to call the template by using data-sl-call. Data-sl-call and then pass the template name. Define this block once and call the same block multiple times, either from the same file or different files. Let's execute this code. Localhost 4502 crxde crx/de. Apps, news portal, components, article detail.html file, and paste the template here. Paste the template here and refresh article 1. Article 1 is a page. Inside this page, we are using article detail component. And check the output. See here. So the content of the template is not rendering. Because we have defined the template. We did not call this template. We did not call this template. If we simply define the template, it won't execute. We have to call this template. Let me call this template in line number 1. And line number 13. 2 times I'm calling the same template by using data-sl-call. This is when the block statement, it will be useful to call the template. And data-sl-template also one more block statement. It will be useful to define the template. Once you define the template, you have to call the template in order to execute this block of HTML markup. And refresh the page. Refresh the page. Check 2 times the template content is rendered. Inspect element and check the HTML markup. This is the HTML markup of the template. In line number 1, after article detail, in line number 1, the response of the template is injected here. And scroll down. By end of the component, also the same response is added because we are calling template 2 times. In the first line and the last line. 2 times we are calling the template. Check the response of the template, the line number 1 and the line number 13. 2 times we are able to call it. So this is one approach. This is one approach, defining template without passing the argument. The second approach, let's discuss template with argument. Templates with argument. We can pass the data to the argument, to the templates. This is the syntax. Just compare the first approach and second approach. In the second approach, data-slf and template dot writer info equal and then dollar curly braces and define the arguments. The arguments always start with @ and then define the n number of variable names: first name, last name, and email. First name and last name and email. So these are the arguments to the template. And these argument values we can use inside the template. We can use inside the template. Check the first name and last name and email. So what are the data we are passing to this template by using this variable? That variable data we can inject inside this template. So this is the second approach. Template with argument. Template with argument. So here also same, @ first name equal Chamu and last name equal Chagani and email equal @gmail.com. So this is the method. This is the template call for template call for template with arguments. Data-sl call equal writer info and @ and variable name equal to value, comma variable name equal value and variable name equal to value. So in this case, we can pass a different data in different places. Let's say in a same file, if you want to call 2 times, while calling this template, we can pass a different data. We can pass a different data. Let's execute this code now. And while calling second time, let me pass a different data. Save the changes and refresh the page. See, the first time This is the data, Chamu, Chagani, and Ridrit. And the second time, Ramu, Pangari, and Ramu.k@gmail.com. The HTML markup is same, but data is different because the template is accepting the arguments. Whenever you call this template, we can pass a different data. Based on the requirement, we can pass different data. But this is a hard-coded data. Even we can inject the dynamic data also. So for example, properties dot first name. Let's say first name is a property in the content node. First name is a property in the content node. Sorry, this dollar curly braces is not required. Directly we can inject. Because we are already inside this syntax. Inside the syntax, we can directly call properties dot first name. So it will inject and pass the first name if the property is available in the content node. So this is the dynamic value we are trying to read from the content node. And last name instead of hard-coded value, we can read from the content node. If you have the content node, we can read and inject here. So this is the second approach, template with argument. In the first approach, in the second approach, we are defining the template and calling the template in the same file. This is the template definition and this is the template call. We are defining in the same template and calling in the same template. But sometimes we have to define the template outside of the file. Let me move this code into writerinfo.html file. Writerinfo.html file. Save the changes and paste the template. Writerinfo.html is one file. Inside this file, we have one template. Inside the file, we have one template called writerinfo. And we are trying to call this writerinfo template inside article-detail.html file. The template definition is available writerinfo.html file. Template call is available in article-detail.html file. Let me refresh the page. See, the entire component is disappeared. There are two reasons if the component is not visible after drag and dropping. The first reason is maybe component content is not available. Second reason, maybe HTL code is returning error. If the HTL code is returning error, go to edit and select the developer. Select the developer mode. And automatically it will open the side panel. And in the side panel, click on errors. So there is an error in article detail component. So without opening the logs, we can check the errors from here. In the developer console, select the developer console and click on error by clicking side panel and expand this article detail. You can copy this entire error. And paste into Notepad for the better understanding. See, data-sl-call expression evaluates to null because the template is not available to that file. The template is not available to that file. There is a runtime exception in your HTL code. So this is one approach. By using the developer console, we can identify the root cause or error of your component. Or else we can use logs in your AEM installation folder. Go to crfix start and go to logs and open error.log. The same log will be available in that file. The same log will be available in that file. So, but this is a simple approach. Then how to fix this issue? So before discussing fix of this issue, if you have knowledge in Java side, you can easily understand this problem. Let's say I have two classes, a.java and b.java. a.java and b.java. And A.Java, I have one method called M1. M1 is the method. So this is instance method. And B.Java, I have one more method called M2 method. M2 method. I would like to call this M1 method inside this M2 method. So I can't simply call M1. I can't simply call M1 by using this syntax. It will return error. Because while compiling, it will check M1 method inside the B.Java class. But in this B.Java class, M1 method is not available. Then how to call this M1 method? M1 method is instant method of this A.Java class. First, we have to create object for A.Java class and then call M1 method. Before calling, M1 method, use this syntax to create object for A class and then use A.M1 method. A.M1 method. So this is the right syntax. If you want to call method of A.Java and B.Java, first create object for A.Java. And then by using that object, call M1 method. In our case also, so we have two files, writerinfo.java, writerinfo.html file. In this file, writerinfo is a template. Writerinfo is a template. And we have one more file called articleinfo.html file or articledetail.html file. Articledetail.html file. In this file, we are trying to call the template of this writerinfo, but it is returning error because this template is not available to this file. First, create object for writerinfo.html file. First, create object for writerinfo.html file by using data-sly-use. If you remember, this is the first block statement we have discussed. Object name, it could be any value. And then writerinfo.html file. So this is the syntax to create object for .html files. .html file. Yes, object is available. Once object is available, we can call the template by using that object. By using that object, we can call the template. So instead of calling this template directly, use this object name because this template is available inside this file. Inside this file, use object name dot template name. Now it won't return any error. While executing this template, it will go to the writerinfo.html file because we are trying to call this template by using this object. This object is representing writerinfo.html file. Object name dot template name. Object name dot template name. So this is the right syntax to call the template, which is defined outside of the file. Let me execute this code. Save the changes. Writerinfo.html file. And then use object name. The object name, it could be any value. Author info is object and it is representing writerinfo.html file. Object name dot template name. And here also same object name dot template name. Save the changes and now refresh. Refresh. Now the component is rendering with the data. Component is rendering with the data. So this is about template. Let me know if you have any questions in templates.
Hey, Chama, we defined this author info object in that div class only. So the scope is not limited to that div only. It remains
No.
throughout.
It would be available for this entire file.
Okay.
Okay, I will give one more example for this template. So if you remember client lib concept, we can load the client libs into HTML in two ways. One is by using template editor page policy, and second approach by using HTL. Second approach is HTL. In HTL, Adobe providing one out-of-box file. In that file, we have three different templates. If you go to the page component and open any one of the file, we'll find out one client lib.html file. So this is one out-of-box HTML file. Out-of-box HTML file, it will be available under libs. It will be available under libs. In this file, we have three templates. CSS is one template, JS is one template, all also one more template. So this is one out-of-box HTML file, and it contains three templates: JS template and CSS template and all template. It is similar to writer info template. So writer info is customized template we have created to render the writer information. But in client lib.html file, we have three more template. Template names are JS, CSS, and all. JS and CSS and all. And this template will be useful to include the client labels into the HTML markup. Let's say client lib, news portal or desktop is one of the category value of the client label. If you want to include that client label in your component, we can use this template. In order to call this template, first create object for data-sly-use dot client lib equal client lib.html file. So in this statement, we are creating object for client lib.html file. So this is the relative path of client lib.html file in JCR repository. Or else we can use absolute path also, /libs/. This is the complete path. Either we can use a complete path or relative path. So it will identify this file in JCR repository and create object for client lib.html file by using data-slfn-use. Once the object is created, by using this object, we can call these three templates: JS template, CSS template, and all template. Div data-sly-call equal $curly braces client lib.js. Client lib is of object of the client lib.html file. .js is the template. And then it required one attribute called categories equal newsportal.desktop. So here newsportal.desktop is the category value of client lib and desktop client library. So this is one of the category value of the client library. We are trying to inject this client library in our component by using the syntax. If you use this syntax, it will inject client lib-desktop.js file. It will include client lib-desktop.js file inside your component. If you use CSS template, it will include only CSS file, client lib-desktop.css file. If you use all template, it will include both CSS file and JS file. So there are three different templates to include either JS files or CSS file or both JS and CSS file of the client library. This is the syntax to include client libraries inside your component by using client lib.html templates. Any questions here? Any questions? Try in your local, create any client library and try to execute this code. So it will include the client library in your component HTML markup, in your HTML component. So these 8 HTL block statements are very important. Even for your interviews also, these 8 block statements are very important. There are 5 more block statements are available, but those are not important. Next one is data hyphen sly hyphen element. Data hyphen sly hyphen element. It will be useful to generate the dynamic HTML elements. So far, we are hard coding H1 tag. Inside the H1 tag, we are trying to inject the data by using dollar curly braces properties.property name. Properties.property name. We are trying to injecting the data. But H1 is a hard coded element. It will always render H1 tag only. The article title always render in H1 tag only. But we can make that element dynamic by using data hyphen element. Check this syntax. H1 is one element. And then I'm using data hyphen element equal properties dot title type. If you remember, we have created one selector. One select means drop down for this title type. Values for H1, H2, and H3 and H4. 4 different values have given in the drop down. And then trying to inject article title. If you don't configure this title type in your content node, it will inject article title in H1 tag only. H1 is the default tag because I have hard coded this H1 tag in my code base. If you select a title type is H2, in the runtime, the H1 tag will replace with H2 tag. In the runtime, the H1 tag will replace with H2 tag because H2 is the value of title type. H2 is the value of the title type. Let's say if you select H4, in the runtime, H1 will replace with H4. This HTML element will change in the runtime based on this value, based on this title type property value in the content node. Let me execute this code. So here I'm using data hyphen sly hyphen element equaled dollar curly braces properties dot title type. Title type is a property in the content node. Through the dialog, we can configure it. But in my local, I don't have the dialog. Let me configure directly the property. Title type, article 1, right? Article 1, article details, and add the title type property. So let me give H2. H2 is the title type property. Check this statement. In this statement, H1 is hard coded, but it will replace with title type in the runtime if the title type property is available in the content mode. Go to preview mode and refresh it once. Inspect element and check the HTML markup. Check the HC. H2. But in our code base, we have defined H1 is the tag. But H1 is replaced with H2 because in the content node, we have this property and the value of the property is H2. the runtime H1 is replaced with H2. So data-SLF element will be useful to define dynamic HTML elements. Dynamic HTML elements. Okay. Next one is data-SLF It will be useful to inject the text into HTML markup. So for example, p tag. Inside the p tag, I'm trying to inject the data. Data-SLF equal properties.json description. And then I'm define the default value here. I never use this data-SLF text because instead of writing this way, we can directly inject the data by adding that HTL expression here. Dollar curly braces properties.json description. We can write directly here. The description is available. It will inject that data into the p tag. But in this approach, if this description is not available, it will render this default value. It will render this default value. If the description is available in the content node, the default value will be replaced with JCR description value. So that is only one difference between without data-SLF text, or else directly also we can inject. I will give the two different syntaxes. See, check these two syntaxes. Both are same. Both are same. So here we are injecting JCR description directly into the p tag. But here we're injecting by using data-SLF text. And here I've defined some default value. Default value. If this description is not available, then this default value will render. If the description is available, the description will replace with this default value. But in this case, if this value is not available, it simply render empty content. It will not return any exception. If the JSON description is available, it will simply render empty response. So that is the difference between data-SLF text and without text. So that's why majority of the cases we don't use this data-SLF text. Directly we can inject the data by using this HTL expression instead of using data-SLF text. There is one more HTL block statement is available, data-SLF attribute. Ninth one is data-SLY element. 10th one is text. And 11th one is attribute. And this attribute also not required. Without attribute also we can inject the data. Check here, div title equals some value and then data-SLF attribute dot title. So here title is an attribute. Title is an attribute we are trying to generate by using data-SLF attribute. Without this data-SLF attribute also we can generate the attribute. See here. So both are same. And this code also generate the title attribute with the value. And this code also generate the title attribute. But here by using HTL, we are generating title attribute, or without HTL, we are generating the title attribute. And this is also not required or not important. And data-slf unwrap, data-slf unwrap, and this is not recommended block statement to use. This is not recommended block statement to use. Instead of using data-slf unwrap, we can use SLY element. SLY element. SLY is one of the custom HTML element from the Adobe. Custom element from the Adobe. It will be useful to write the HTML block statements. If you go to our HTML markup in writer info, for example, so here I'm using one unnecessary div to define the template. To define the template, I'm using one unnecessary div. So this div or HTML element is required to define data-slf element. Data-slf template. Because this is one attribute. So we can't define this attribute without this element. Here it could be a div element or p element or span element. Any one of the HTML element we have to use. So this div is useful only to define these attributes, either custom attributes or predefined attributes. Because of this div, so there will be one additional div is generating. Check here. See, this div is additional div. In this div, we have written data-slf template syntax. So without this div or without this HTML element, we can't write any one of the HTML block statement. So there is one unnecessary div is generating here. If you want to avoid this unnecessary div rendering, in two ways we can do it. One is by using data-slf unwrap. Data-sly unwrap. So the use of this data-slf unwrap after execution of this HTML block statement. After execution of this HTML block statement, it will remove this div from the final output. It will remove this div from the final output. Only this content will render on page. So this additional div will not render into the final HTML mark because it will remove this additional div from the HTML mark. So this is one approach. So rather than defining data-slf unwrap, we can use SLY element. SLY is custom HTML element from Adobe. We can use SLY. SLY is an element. So by using this element, we can define these attributes. Attributes or block statement we can define. Now refresh and check the HTML markup. Why it is still rendering? Okay, got it. So while calling also we are using this div. While calling also we are using this div. So here also this div is unnecessary HTML element. Use SLY instead of div. Okay, I'm sorry. So here we have to use the call. So in the object creation also we can use, because this statement will be useful only for object creation and it doesn't require in HTML markup. So that's why I'm using SLY. Now these statements are directly rendering inside this article detail component without these additional HTML elements. So this data hyphen SLF and unwrap or SLF statement will be useful to remove unnecessary element from the HTML markup. Unnecessary HTML markup from the HTML element from the HTML markup. The last one is data hyphen SLF set. It will be useful to define one variable and assign the value to that variable. Assign the value to that variable. Data hyphen SLF set. So here we are defining one variable called title and assigning value to this title by reading data from the content node. And this variable we can use inside the file wherever it required. Instead of reading from the property name, we can directly call $curly braces and then variable name. Because data hyphen SLF set will be useful to define the variable and assign value to that variable. And it will read the value from article title property and assign to title variable. So this title variable we can use within the file. So that's all about the block statement. Let me know if you have any questions. Total 13 block statements are available. Out of 13, first eight are important. First 8 are very important. Any questions in these block statements? Okay. Next concept in HTL is global objects. Global objects. So article detail is a component. In article detail component, article detail.html is the file. Inside this file, we are using properties.property name, $curly braces, properties.property name. So what is properties? And where did you define these properties? And what is the use of this property? So here properties is one global object. Global object P. By default, Apache Sling generate the object and this object would be available to all .html files. And this object would be available to all .html files. And when these objects will generate, let's say if you try to access a page from the browser, the page name is article 1. By using this path, if you are trying to access it, all this content node will execute one by one. And each content node is pointing to one component. So for example, article detail is a content node. In this content node, we have the multiple properties: article title, article description, article image, and title type, article expiry, article labels, related articles. Multiple properties are available. Before executing or before forwarding the request from this content node to component, Sling generate one object. Called properties. Properties is an object name, but the backend API class name is value map. Student ST equal to new student. So in that syntax, student is the class, ST is the object. So in this syntax, properties is an object. But the backend implementation class is value map IMPL. But value map is an interface, and this interface we have an implementation class called value map IMPL. While executing this content node, first it will generate object called properties, and then it will add all the properties of this content node into properties object. Simply copy paste all the properties of this article detail content node into properties object. Because value map is a map implementation in Java. In the map, we can store the data in key value pair. Even this content node also store the data in key value pair. Even the content node also store the data in key value pair. The entire data will move to properties object. And this properties object available to this HTML file. While forwarding the request from the content node to component, Sling forward this properties object also. In the properties object, it contains all the properties of this content node. Now, when you call properties.article title, it will return the property called article title. Properties.article. In simple term, properties is a replica of this content node. What are the properties are there in the content node? All the properties will be available to these properties, and this object will be available to .html file. We can call properties.property name article title. Similarly, while executing page, the first node is JCR content. JCR content is a root node of this page. Article 1 is the page. Under article 1, JCR content is a root node of the page. While executing this JSR content node, it will generate one more object called page properties. Page properties is one more object. And this page property is a replica of this JSR content node. All the properties of this JSR content would be available in the page properties. In the page properties. And this page properties object will be available to all the component which is being used in this page. The same object. The same page properties object would be available to article detail component and breadcrumb component and teaser component also. Because this is the root node of the page. While executing this root node, page properties global object will generate. Check the type is value map. Value map is the type, but object name is page properties. And the data also different. All the page level data which is stored in JSR content will be available in page properties. For every component, so these page properties and properties both are available. Let's say if you want to render page title in your component, we can use page properties dot title. Page properties dot JCR title. JCR title is a property inside this JCR content node. But this page properties will update to component. While executing article detail, it will create a properties object. And it contains properties of this article detail content node into properties. Similarly, let's say there is one more content node called teaser. And teaser also contains some properties. While executing this teaser content node, it will generate one more properties object. One more properties object, and this object contain all the properties of this teaser content node. And it forward this properties object and page properties object. So page properties object is common across all component of the page. Page property is common. And in addition to that, it will forward the properties also. The properties is a value map implementation. Value map implementation, it contains all the properties of this node. So that we can directly access properties inside your component, either by using page properties or properties. Page properties mean page level properties, which is stored in JSR content node of the page. So these properties are available to all these components. And properties means current content node properties. Current content node properties. So these two are the important global objects. And this global object would be available to all HTML files. Directly we can access without creating object. Without creating object of the properties and page properties, we can directly access it because these are the global object, and this global object would be available to .html file in the runtime. Any questions in HTL global objects? Any questions in HTL global object? So we have around 28 global objects are available. We have around 28 global objects are available. All these objects would be available to your .html file in the runtime. Properties is the most frequently used global object to read the content node properties. Page properties also one of the most frequently used global object to read the page level JSR content node property in your component. Page level JCR content node properties in your component. Let's say if you use 10 components in your page, in all 10 components, the same object will be available because the page properties are same for all 10 templates of this page. And there is one more object called inherited page properties. Inherited page properties. It is similar to page properties, but inherited page property means, let's say if you try to access any property by using page properties dot property name, it will check only in the current page. It will check only in the current page JCR content node. But if you use inherited page properties, it will check the current page. If the current page doesn't have that property, it will go to the parent pages also. First, it will check top level parent and then again parent. It will check until the root page. Until the root page, if any one of the parent page is having that property, it will return that value. So that is the difference between page properties and inherited page properties. So both will be useful to read the page property, but page property means within the page. Inherited page property means within the page and parent pages also. It will search parent pages also if the current page doesn't have that property. So there is multiple global objects are available: current style, current page, current resource, page manager, component context, current design. There is multiple global objects are available. We'll discuss in detail in the API session. I will take a separate session to discuss about these global objects and this global object API and its methods. So please let me know if you have any questions in global objects. So this flow is very important. While executing this content node, all the properties of the content node will add it to the properties object and pass this object to article detail component because this content node is pointing to article detail component. Similarly, while executing breadcrumb, it will create one more properties object and add all the properties of this content node into properties and pass to breadcrumb component. And these are also same. But common thing here, JSR content node. JSR content node properties will be added to page properties, and this page properties object will available to all the component. Any questions in HTL global objects? Okay, so there is multiple variables. So operators are supported by HTL. So these are the different operators. Logical operator means not and or, and ternary operator and comparison operator and grouping parentheses and relational operators. And majority of the operators are the known operators. If you have knowledge in Java side or JavaScript side or any programming language, so these are the common operators. Logical operators and ternary operator and comparison operator and grouping parentheses and relational operator. And before discussing about these operator, the HTL expression support only these three data types. The HTL expression support only these three data types. That means while injecting data in HTL expression by using any one of the global object, syntax is dollar curly braces properties dot property name. That property dot property name value type should be either Boolean value or number value or string value on array. Or I mean either Boolean array or number array or string array. It will support only these three data types. If you try to inject any value which is the data type is maybe different from this list. For example, JCR created. JCR created is a date. If you try to inject date inside HTL expression, it will not render the exact value. Let me try to print JCR created value. So here, dollar curly braces properties dot JCR created. JCR created is one of the property in the content node. See, this is the content node. Check for the JCR created. This is the default value. JCR created and this value by default it will add into the content node whenever you drag and drop. This is the value I'm expecting to print on page. JSR created is a property. I'm trying to read this property by using properties.jsr created. See, this is the format. Because HTL expressions support only Boolean and string and number values only. If you try to inject other than these three data types, it will render incorrect format of the data on page. Then how to print this type? How to print these dates? To print this date, we have to use formatters. Formatter also one more concept in HTL. By using that formatters only, you can print the date type of values. Date type of values. So after the screen, I will show you how to print the dates by using this formatter. But these are the supported operators. You can check here. So this is the comparison operator equal to take the property with the property value. And this is also comparison operator not equal and less than and greater than. So majority of the cases, this operator we use in data-SQL text. Text is a conditional based statement. To write this condition, we can use these logical operators and comparison operators. Logical operators and comparison operator. Let's say if you have the multiple condition, we can use logical operators and or so these operators we can use. To write the multiple condition inside the text, we can use and or. Even not also we can use inside inside text condition on. So relational operator will be useful to identify whether the particular value is available in array or not. Check this syntax. A in ABC. ABC is a string. A is a character. A in ABC it will return true. It is similar to contains method in the list API. If you know the Java list API, in the list contents is the method to identify a particular value in a list or not. A in ABC. Or else we can apply for the arrays also. In the array, I have the multiple values. We can use 100 in my array. It will return true value because 100 is available in this array. So in if equal to contains, it will be useful to identify particular string or character in a statement, or it will be useful to identify particular value in array also. In operator. So this is the syntax for formatters. Format @format equal value. Let me execute JSR content. Year, month, and date is the format. Equal, sorry, @format equal properties.jsr created. So this is the syntax to print the date values inside HTML mark. So this is the date format, year, month, and date. And @format equal properties.jsr created. JSR created. It will read the values of the content node and convert that string into this format. Sorry, convert the date into this format and print into the HTML mark. See, year, month, and date. This format will be useful to concat the strings also. If you have the multiple strings, if you want to concat or replace into the existing one, we can use this format. So for example, component and first placeholder out of second placeholder. Format equal properties.title and properties.description. So there are two different properties we are trying to read from the properties, title and description. In the runtime, this title and description will be injected here. The first placeholder title and second placeholder is for the description. Because we can't use these arithmetic operators like plus to concat the strings. If it is Java, we can use concat method or plus operator to concat two different strings. But HTL, we can use format to inject the content node properties into the middle of the string. This is the syntax. Even we can use this formatter to print the decimal values also. There are three different use cases. One is to render the dates, and second one is to concat the strings, and third one is to print the decimal values. So this is the use of the format. Sorry, I have to extend 5 more minutes. The last concept is context. The last concept is context. HTL context. So while injecting data into the HTML markup, HTL can understand the context of the data injection. So for example, H1 is a tag, and we are trying to print article title inside this H1 tag. Properties dot article title. Properties dot article title. Properties dot article title. We did not mention the context here because HTL can understand the HTML language. This is HTML language, but this HTL can understand this HTML language. While injecting the data, it can understand the context of the place. For example, here, default context is text. Default context is text, because this is the place where we have to inject the text inside the element. This is the place to inject the text of the element. So it can understand the context. So that's why we don't need to mention the context value here. Context value is optional. Even if you don't define, it will consider context is text. Context is text because we're injecting data into the H1 element in text area. Similarly, while injecting data in href, in anchor tag, href equal dollar curly braces properties dot article page, for example. Article page is the one, properties dot article page. So here also it can understand the context because we are trying to inject data into href. We are trying to inject data into href. The HTML can understand the context. Context equal href. So these are the different contexts are available in HTL. Text, HTML, attribute, URI number, attribute name, element name, unsafe, and attribute name, and script token, script string, script comment, script regular expressions, style string, styles token, style comment. There is multiple contexts available. But majority of the cases, we don't define this context here. Defined context attribute is optional because HTL can understand this context. But sometimes we have to pass the context. Examples. Let's say article title is one HTML markup. So instead of giving jailer movie trailer is a text. Let's say I'm giving B tag, I'm applying B tag for movie. So this is the HTML markup I have configured through the dialog. If we print this value inside the H1 tag, it will print as it is, including HTML mark. Because default context is text, it will consider as a text only. Even if you have the HTML markup inside this text, it will consider as a normal text. It will print that normal text on page. Let me try to execute it. Article title. Where is article? Yeah, so here. Save the changes. See, including B tag, the data is injected because the default context value is text. It will consider as a normal text. normal text and inject into HTML markup. If it is a normal text, we don't need to define this context because default context value is text only. But this is HTML markup. So in this case, we have to override the default context value. We have to override the default context value. Default context value is text. Text. So if it is a default value injection, you don't need to mention this as an attribute. But here we are trying to inject HTML markup. Now, Mr. Text, use HTML. Use HTML. The context attribute is required only if you want to override the default context value. So here the default context value is a text, but I'm using HTML. I'm trying to inject HTML. So that's why I have mentioned @context equal HTML. @context equal HTML. The context attribute is required if you want to override the default context of the HTL. Now refresh. Based on the context value, it will consider the data injection type is HTML and it will inject as a HTML markup. See, jailer and movies B tag and trailers. B tag. But while injecting data into JavaScript and CSS, context is mandatory. JavaScript and CSS, context is mandatory. Context is mandatory. Because HTL can understand HTML language. HTL can understand the HTML language, but it can't understand JavaScript and CSS. Let's say if you try to inject any one of the value as a JavaScript variable, we'll write the script tag. Inside the script tag, let's say where article title equal $curly braces properties dot article title. We are trying to inject your article title into JavaScript variable. In this example, even if we have article title in your content node, it will return empty value because you're trying to inject data into the JavaScript variable. So this JavaScript, HTL can't understand the JavaScript. If the HTL can't understand the JavaScript, it will simply remove the value from here. Because while injecting data in JavaScript and CSS, context is mandatory. Context equal script string. Script means JavaScript string value. So context is required or mandatory for the JavaScript and CSS. Let's say here $curly braces properties dot variable name. Let's say I have one dynamic variable name. Dynamic variable name. This variable name will change based on the configuration. So here we have to use context equal script token. Script string for value, script token for variable name. Let's say if you want to generate a dynamic JavaScript variable name, use script token. For value, use script string. Similarly, for the styles also. For the CSS styles also. Let's say if you want to generate the dynamic CSS class name, or let me use article title. Content. Properties dot context equal style string. Because this is the value of the property. Use style string. And similarly, if you want to define a custom property name, context is called style token. Style token and value. Similarly. So this is how we have to inject the data inside the JavaScript and CSS files. CSS, not the file, code snippets. Code snippets. Context is mandatory while injecting data into JavaScript code inside the HTML markup or the CSS code inside the HTML markup. So this is about the context.